me lies. Asking me lies.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Lies, More Lies, and Damned Media Lies. The title of our podcast is A Bastardization of Mark Twain's Lies, Damned Lies, and Statistics. We'll look at the sins of omission and commission of today's print, television, and digital media in the line, not only of Twain, but also A.J. Liebling, Alexander Colburn, and Beavis and Butthead. I'm Dennis Bro, novelist, journalist, media critic, and my special guest today is...
Leanne Lord, everybody.
Okay, and she is a New York stand-up comic and social commentator. She's been on Comedy Central, HBO, and Def Comedy Jam. And we are coming to you from Paris, where Leanne is here on her honeymoon. So before we get started, congrats.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Yes, we're having high heat today, but it is Paris.
It's Paris.
Okay. Our lead is called Who Wants to Tax a Billionaire? Certainly not Democratic center-rightists. Two recent moments on both posts shed light on an improbable insurgency within the Democratic Party as it struggles to move away from its contempt of the working class and possibly entertain policies and candidates more in tune with the majority of Americans. The two moments are the 5% tax on billionaires in California and the three victories of New York Mayor Mamdani-backed working class and anti-Zionist candidates in New York. Both are being fiercely opposed by, as you might guess, billionaires, Zionist billionaires, and their backers in the Democratic Party and the mainstream press, who are allies of both. The Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Gavin Newsom wing are quaintly called Democratic centrists and sometimes even more quaintly called liberals. But as is becoming clearer every day, they are in effect center-rightists or worse. One of the strongest labor unions in California, the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, has struggled mightily but successfully to get a referendum on the ballot this November that amounts to a one-time 5% tax of billionaires in the state. The money to go to make up deficits in the healthcare system, devastated by Trump's cuts to the federal healthcare budget, and the tax giveaways to the mightiest in his big, beautiful bill. The opposition to this motion is extraordinary, coming mainly, as you would guess, from the billionaires themselves, but also being disguised in many forms by not so well-meaning organizations and spearheaded by Gavin Newsom. The New York Times led off the current attack with its headline, "Unlikely Coalition Begins Campaign Against Billionaire Tax in California." The article repeats Newsom's often claimed argument that taxing billionaires will cause them to leave the state, but then goes on to list further opposition to this reckless wealth tax experiment from doctors, health clinics, and school boards, all suggesting other forms of taxation might be better employed to counter the crisis. Newsom is so adamantly against the bill that he first campaigned to keep it off the November ballot, claiming recently in a story highlighted in The Guardian that instead he favors a countrywide tax so that billionaires will not flee his state. Newsom's proposal is hollow presidential electioneering designed to sink an actual existing petition signed by a whopping 1.6 million California state voters. The billionaire opposition has sponsored two poison pills also on the November ballot that will nullify the bill if it's passed. One, barring any new tax on personal wealth, and the other, forcing any new tax to comply with state spending rules. That means the voters will have to vote both for the tax and at the same time against the other two measures that would nullify it, a clear ploy to confuse those in favor of the tax. The Los Angeles Times, prior to the New York Times story about the wider opposition, had presented the opposition as mainly the billionaire class. After the Times story, the California paper of record acknowledged this new opposition, but still led with a story favoring the tax, which is now also opposed as well by Xavier Becerra, the likely next governor. The argument from the centrist politicians that this is the wrong tax at the wrong time is specious. There's no right time to begin the arduous process of taxing billionaires and Elon Musk trillionaires, soon to be joined by other AI mavens, to pay their fair share, having benefited greatly from government largesse to the point that 12 billionaires now control more than half of humanity's wealth. The California measure, if approved, could be the beginning of a tax revolt, but in the right direction, unlike the 80s California tax tax revolt, which stripped poorer communities of their education and health facilities. The fear in the upper classes is that this revolt will take off, and they want to stop it any way they can. So you have Newsom seemingly concerned that his state not be a place billionaires will flee, while actually fronting for the billionaire class. These taxes are being proposed everywhere in the world, spearheaded by tax expert Gabriel Zucman, a protege of Thomas Piketty, whose Capital in the 21st Century highlighted the problem of massively unequal taxation. Zucman proposed a 2% tax on the ultra-rich in France, who he determined in his new book, We Need to Tax Billionaires, paid less than 25% of their wealth compared to everyone else who pays 50%. The proposal was met with the same heated resistance as in California. Instead, the French state now proposes massive cuts in health care and an over 400% increase in tuition to fund an education system in turmoil, both due to the massive transfer of wealth from the middle and bottom to the top under the centrist banker Macron. To their credit, in the U.S., the SEIU refused even a 2% compromise and stuck to the original 5%. Equally stunning was the victory of three progressive candidates backed by Mayor Mamdani in the New York primaries. The New York Times, before and after these victories, was equally terrified, accusing Mamdani of burning allies and the mayor's campaigning for three candidates who would help him champion in working class affordability issues, such as Mamdani's recent rent freeze, as opposed to centrist Dems, who only give lip service to these issues and only when they are pressed. The Times feared those losses could weaken the mayor's political standing just 6 months into his term. The paper of record's pretended concern actually being a warning to the mayor to not attempt to change a party which has lost its working class base and which equally lost the last election based on its backing of Zionist genocide. Once the candidate succeeded, the paper then voiced its fear that these three would cause headaches for Nancy Pelosi's handpicked and henpecked successor, Hakeem Jeffries' attempt to be House Speaker, instead of the more likely occurrence that these three will push Jeffries off his anti-working class pro-Zionist stances and actually invest new life and vigor into what amounts to a dead party whose last winning presidential candidate hid out in a basement and got elected by watching Trump shoot himself in the foot. Well, then in his unwillingness to actually accomplish anything, laying the groundwork for Trump's return. Once again, the mainstream press shows itself out of step and trembling in front of American voters. So we'll go to you and see if you have any comments.
Would you be me?
Pardon?
Do you mean me?
Yes, you. I'll ask you if you have any comments on that. Yes. I meant you, yes.
Yes. Wow, that's a lot to comment on, my dear. I barely know where to begin. The phrase that you said that stuck out in my head was the wrong tax at the wrong time, as if there's a wrong time to do the right thing. And every time these topics come up, I'm like, if they just paid their taxes. Just pay your taxes. We don't need charity. We don't need a lottery. You pay your taxes. Just even a little bit more. Like, how much money do you need? How many generations down the line are you trying to provide for while harming current generations? I just don't think it's that hard, but maybe I am failing to think like a billionaire, which is probably my downfall here.
Or an asset. Yes.
Or an asset.
On this show, that's an asset. Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe your downfall. Maybe your downfall everywhere else, but
everywhere else, looking around at the world, I'm like, did I do the wrong thing by trying to do the right thing? It's very upside down right now.
This idea that there has to be a right time, and we have to tiptoe around this because what if we actually did tax them? Oh my God, kind of. It's ridiculous,
A radical idea, and I'm sure I am not the first person to have this. If they actually participated and said, listen, let's just pay 10%, 15%, consider it the cost of doing business. And everybody floats like they get to keep the yacht. We just get boats with no holes. Like that's a thing that we could do, and they could look magnanimous. The days when multimillionaires or billionaires built libraries and museums and wonderful public things like that. Now, I'm sure there's a dirty backstory to that I have not been taught. But there's a better way, and it doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't.
And the more radical, what if they paid the same percent of their income that we're paying? Oh my
What?
God. Can you
What?
imagine anyone
This is
proposing that?
no, no, I can't. This is madness. This is madness.
Okay, so you know what? We're going to go to an interview with Leanne, and because she's a stand-up comic, and she's
Allegedly.
allegedly, no, not allegedly. I know that you are an actual stand-up comic, not just allegedly, for many years. And you know, I'll ask you a few questions just to get a sense of what you do. Is it difficult to make a living doing this?
Yes, it is when you choose to do anything freelance as a business, when you strike out on your own to do anything, you are working a lot harder than if you worked for someone else and had I'm dating myself now, a 9 to 5. There are no set hours. And then you add the extra
At
difficulty of
ours,
you're
there's no
choosing to
set jobs anymore.
no, no, it really has come around to everybody else living the way I live, which is not very comforting. But when you choose to do something that you love, when you choose to do your art, your music, your comedy, your writing for yourself, it increases the level of difficulty and the level of hustle, as we used to call it
Mhm.
back in the day. And so you really have to love it, both it for me the show side and the business side, or at least come to some understanding that if you're going to do show business, you have to also do business.
Yeah.
And yes, it is incredibly difficult. It's quite a dance. You end up being what we call in my industry a multi hyphenate. So you're performing, you're writing, you're doing corporate work, you're doing a lot of things to sort of cobble together
Mhm.
a living, although I am proud to say that I have been a working stand-up comedian from the time that I said I was crazy enough to say, yes, I want to do this. And so I'm in a very fortunate and small percentage of people who do this for a living.
Good for you. So, what's it like being a comic in the age of Trump? Is it possible to be more ludicrous than our president?
Um,
Or how do you
Dennis,
handle them?
well, here's the thing. I've gotten away from day drinking, and you're bringing me right back. That is how I feel about it. My bourbon bill at one point was astronomical. I was keeping companies and business all by myself. It's weird. It's when life is more absurd than reality. It's like how do you joke about that? It's like, well, ta-da! They've already done it. Um, I find that people can't even keep up with all the crazy things going on. You can go down the rabbit hole on one particular executive order and you're already 4 or 5 executive orders behind.
It's
So and that's people who are keeping up. For the people who are not, it's impossible. So you have to really be careful and pick and choose where you leap in to this fray.
good. Um, is it easier or harder in this age to talk about or joke about current events or issues?
It's both. And it also depends on the audience. It's easier because it's right there. It's just right there. You could almost. I'm thinking of a comic. I believe his name was Mart Saul.
Mm.
For me, old school comic. I don't mean to insult anybody, but definitely before my time. But I
Comic
believe
and
he
comic
was.
and satirist.
Yes, I believe he was the one that would just sit and read newspaper headlines from the stage. And it's like, I think this is exactly what someone could do right now. I think Dick Gregory might have also done that. And that could be your whole act. You don't even have to write a joke. You can read a headline and then just look at the audience. And the ludicrousness of it all, the actual word, not the rapper. I mean, so in that sense, it's easy. What's hard is that people are indeed worn out by the news. So the audiences, we do have more audiences uh, on one hand because people want a break. They want a respite. They want to laugh about anything other than this sometimes. And in that way, it makes it easier because I think some entertainers want that as well.
Okay. And I do just want to put it out because I think you have some opinions on things like healthcare and also on income disparity. And I think that's something that's, as I say, in your wheelhouse, isn't it? Or can you talk about these things?
It's in my wheelhouse in the sense that healthcare tied to employment has become a very tricky thing when you are self-employed.
Mm.
And I joke, but getting married to someone who has a regular job will definitely help my health insurance
Okay.
situation. And the disparity on the dollar is, everyone jokes that women, and these are United States numbers. Everyone, forgive me for my bias. Um, Women make about 85 cents on the dollar, but now if you dig down into that, Black women make 65
Mm.
cents on the dollar. And no amount of, arguing, lobbying, appealing to people has seemed to move that number. So I want to go in the other direction. Fine. I already make 65 cents on the dollar. I want an automatic 35% discount on everything when I walk into the store.
For you. I think you should demand that. Um,
Yes.
who is your primary influence and why does this brand of comedy appeal to you?
Oh, there are several people, but I will say primarily I guess my first comedic love, or the first person that I noticed that deeply influenced me was George Carlin. Yes, yes. I often say I'm from the George Carlin School of Comedy, although there are a number of influences there. But him mainly, I cite because he seemed to have the ability to joke about things that were not funny on their face. He was able to point out these absolutely bananas things that everyone else is thinking about but may not be able to say, and make them funny. And the lesson that I got from him is that if you can make people laugh together about the hard things, and it's not funny, but they laugh, and then in that cleansing breath, they go, huh, maybe we should fix that. So it's like the comedy is the cleansing breath
Yep.
that lets people, you poke fun at something that's absolutely ridiculous, and yeah, maybe we should do something about that. And I loved his ability to do that.
Okay, what challenges do you face doing comedy?
Continuing to be paid for
Yeah, that's a big
it.
one.
Listen, how people value art is insane, or don't value it. Um, I think if we were able to say the P word, pandemic, one of the first things that people turned to besides healthcare was entertainment. And the value that people actually like, oh, we love acting, we love movies, we love music, we love, comedy. And it's like, well, those things cost money, you guys, in terms of supporting the artistic community. And so, yes, continuing to earn a living doing this, particularly in the face of artificial intelligence, which seems to have colonized, and I'm using that word very specifically, intellectual property is terrifying. I'm watching areas of my industry. Yes, I'm a stand-up comic. Yes, that's my part of the business, but I also look at the wider entertainment industry as a whole because things don't stay in one area. If musicians are harmed, if screenwriters are harmed, at some point that trickles throughout the entire industry, and we all feel that. And so that's one of the things that I do worry about, being able to continue doing this. Very personally, I'm not 20 years old anymore. And the way that we make money is much the same way that musicians make money. You have to tour, you have to go out on the road, and the road gets a little harder the older you get, and where the places that you go, and whether or not you have the stamina and the ability to do that. So there are multi levels
Yeah.
that I worry about, and free speech. Free speech is the big one here. It's like I thought we could say what we wanted. I grew up being able to say what I wanted, not in front of my parents, of course. Uh, but if the First Amendment isn't the First Amendment, I don't know if I can do what I do in a real sense
There's
in
that.
the United States.
Yep. Yes. And elsewhere. Yeah.
And elsewhere. I'm sorry,
Um,
a long-winded answer. My apologies.
just one thing. So, I just did an AI, I just did a thing on AI, and we had, the Times had this long article with the first AI actress right? So it was very disgusting. But will we see an AI stand-up comic?
We have.
Really?
Well, someone, again, I don't have names or details. Please, everyone, feel free to fact check anything I say or anything anyone else says. That's how how we human here now. But someone created an image of George Carlin and put what, and I guess their prompt was, if George Carlin was alive now,
Oh,
what would
okay.
he say?
Okay.
You know, they used his image without permission, without Kelly Carlin, that's his daughter, without approaching her or their business or foundation. And I think perhaps they thought they were doing it in homage. Most of us were deeply offended and disgusted.
Yeah.
Like you're it feels like such a violation. You know, we have what we have of someone. That's their body of work. To put words in their mouth feels incredibly disrespectful because you can make an AI image say or do anything. You also have people who are using AI to help them write. No! Use your brain, everybody. Earn your thumbs.
Yes, that happens in my professional. I mean, I'm a novelist also, and I write screenplays. But yes, that happens.
Yes.
Okay, finally, you work in entertainment, but what do you do for entertainment?
Okay, so I have to tell you, no one has ever asked me that question. And um, my new passion is actually origami. That's what, because it allows me to sit and be quiet and focus and not be on my phone and off of my screen. And I think I miss those things. I don't read books as often as I should, but audiobooks is another form of entertainment for me. And my biggest enjoyment in entertainment, and I will scream it from the rafters, I am a huge, huge Star Trek fan. If you could not tell,
Okay.
I rep the franchise because Star Trek is one of the few things in science fiction that does not show us a dystopian future. It
Mhm.
shows us a positive one of what human beings can do when we get our act together. And I love that.
Good. Okay. All right, we're going to move to the next segment, which we call Media Watch, regular feature where we review and comment on stories in the New York Times and elsewhere in the mainstream media that illustrate the privileged status of those corporate entities inside the Washington, London military imperial beltway and the New York financial bubble. Let's start with what at first may seem improbable, but is actually quite logical and revealing, a piece about the Washington Uniparty, an editorial in the Financial Times, where the destroyer of Libya, once boasting the best health and education system in Africa, and now returned to slave markets, Hillary Clinton, opts for Trump's Board of Peace plan for Gaza, removing the inhabitants from their open-air prison and putting them in an actual prison in order to turn what is left of their land into a beachfront development. Not to sign on to this proposal, Clinton claims, is to opt for the perfect, which in this case she says is the enemy of the possible. She calls herself an implacable opponent of the president, the better to put across her now conceding that rather than either a Palestinian state or an Israel where everyone has equal rights, the most practical solution is real estate development and concentration camps. Clinton, a war criminal who should be on trial in The Hague, instead teaches political science at Columbia, just as her fellow Democrat Nancy Pelosi will soon be teaching at Berkeley. The two together now featuring must-take courses like Clinton's How to Destroy Health and Education Infrastructure in Africa and Pelosi's Congress course on How to Increase Your Wealth by Insider Trading, helping to bring up a next generation of bloodthirsty imperialists who will add to their own personal wealth accumulation while the world burns. A fascinating, in all the wrong ways, opinion piece in the New York Times headlined, "The Real AI Race Isn't America versus China," explained that the problem was not either country, but rather Chinese government monitoring and steering AI development of control of profits, versus the private entrepreneurial spirit, which also needs to be further unleashed in the US. China, through its 5-year plan, steers the direction in which AI is developed, de-emphasizing and regulating individual profit while promoting AI integration into China's industrial sector. In the US, AI is being instead developed to, along with its Wall Street investors, further unemployment and increase financialization as it instead generates huge profits for its soon-to-be trillionaires. The article cites the disciplining of Jack Ma, Alibaba's head, and the refusal of the Chinese government to grant all power to its millionaire class, while the US government encourages and promotes AI not as social tool, but as individual wealth generator, with increasingly more power being assumed by the tech magnates, which the Times is cheering on. Elsewhere, the Times, with the Chinese head Xi Jinping's visit to North Korea, acknowledges that almost in isolation, North Korea is now developing not only a defense capability to protect its sovereignty, but also a program of economic expansion for its people. Though the recognition was actually a backhanded swipe, and the paper of record gave away the game in its citing of its sources for the largely negative article. The Times, in needing to uncover this transformation, instead of consulting economic indicators, or worse yet, actually speaking to the North Korean people, instead sought out post-pandemic defectors and experts with inside connections while scrutinizing state media and leaked regime documents. Even the Times, though, with its array of dissenters, had to admit that the economic miracle wrought in the socialist country was impressive. They quote, "North Korea has added more oil terminals at its ports, and there are more cars, buses, trucks, and construction equipment visible across the country. This production will only increase," even the Times concluded, "with the introduction of electric vehicles from China, and in light of Xi's and Kim's meeting. This progress has to be balanced, of course, in the view of the Western press, by the country's leader, Kim Jong-un's expensive pursuit of nuclear weapons, as if the weapons were part of a personal arsenal and not the guarantor of Korea being left alone by its US and Japanese enemies and by those US stooges in the South who want to prolong a war that to this day has never been settled. The trick of the article is to pretend that North Korea, its government, its people, cannot be consulted on their own country's development and fate. Only leaked documents will suffice, a ploy that continues the idea in the West that any socialist country must have so stifled dissent that its citizens are not worth speaking to, since they will only mouth propaganda, or if that country is successful, it must be ignored. Finally, the Times continued its exposure, or actually cover-up, of the Jeffrey Epstein case with its thorough investigation of the last moments of Epstein's life. There have been multiple questions raised about the guards not being present for the supposed suicide, about a mysterious person appearing on camera, as well as sightings of what is claimed to be Epstein alive in Israel, and a good deal of speculation that on the eve of a court appearance where he would be asked to name names, he may have been murdered. The Times was able to put all those questions to rest, though a majority of Americans either believe or are unsure of whether or not he was murdered. The lengthy article concluded that all these questions were easier to ask than answer, making the case the perfect petri dish for conspiracy theories. The Times refused to give credence to any of these questions, and instead ended its investigation with a final image of Epstein as someone vague, elusive, a blur, a ghost. A nice note of ambiguity that dissolves all the unanswered questions into a haze, a mist. The child molester and blackmailer for a foreign government becomes just a ghost in the paper of record's forlorn and unsuccessful attempt to transform actual events into a bourgeois parlor game, but one that every day loses its efficacy. And that's Media Watch, so I wonder if you have comments on any of those. You're muted.
Dennis, how do you keep track of all this and preserve your sanity? This is
For some reason, I enjoy doing it.
Do you? Okay. Because
It's grist for the mill.
okay. Okay, because every story it's like, well, this can't get worse. Oh, it just did get worse. And then there's more. Hey, if you're feeling any ounce good about yourself, well, there's more bad stuff. And to think we are under the illusion that everybody else has propaganda and we don't, that they're falling for it and we're not. And it's like, hey guys, guess what? We invented it.
That's right. And are
Perfected it. Yeah. This is all very frightening. I'm day drinking.
Yes. Or come back. I live facing it every day, and I do read the Times every day, so I have to do something while I'm reading it. So this is what I
Okay.
do. This is how I while away my time reading the.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to go to what we call narrative watch. It's time for our guest to comment on any aspect of the current story or the narrative that corporate media is telling, and how that story is either fraying around the edges or in tatters. And then I'll have my own narrative watch. So, what irks you at the moment on mainstream media? Please be irksome.
Okay. Here's what irks me. Everything irks me, to be honest with you. And I've actually pulled back from mainstream media because I don't feel like I'm getting
Yeah.
the honest story on any of it. To give you a tiny,
Let
tiny,
me just say something that I spend most of my time, to answer your question, while I spend my lunches reading the Times, I spend most of my time listening to alternative media where I get
yes,
hope, and where I get the truth, which is
yes.
important, which is important as hope. It's important to get the truth. So I have my daily dose of propaganda, and then
Mhm.
I make sure that I have 2 doses of the truth on alternative media.
I think that is a fantastic recipe. I have gone to a number of media workshops where they say it's important. You got to vet your sources. You have to fact check. And what really vexes me is social media because they're meant to hit you, and it's meant to provoke a reaction. Even if it's a reaction in agreement, you have to even be more careful about that. And it's like, okay, this is hitting my anger button. This wants to make me mad. And now I have to now step back and go, is this true?
Mhm.
And a lot of people aren't doing that. We're not being trained to do that, to preserve our critical thinking skills. And a lot of times, many times I check something like, oh, that's not true. Or its source was Instagram. Its source was Reddit. And it's like,
Yeah.
I feel I have to preserve my energy to be angry about the right things, not the things they always want me to be angry about.
Well, and with AI, it's even trickier
Yes, yes, it is.
because that
And
stuff looks accurate.
I
It
was
has,
just wa-
you know, that's what it does. That's all it does. It looks accurate. It isn't, but it looks accurate.
in the studies have shown that if you are prompt, if someone says, "Hey, can you pick out the AI in this?" People will think that they're picking out the AI. They're looking at the fingers and the this and the that, unprompted, unasked. If you're just scrolling, you don't know.
Yeah.
Because AI has gotten that good, and it leads to the theory of the dead internet that none of this stuff is good for us anymore, if indeed ever was.
Yes. And you know what? It is, we usually do try to at least mention some alternative media. I'm going to mention a little bit. The Gray Zone
Hmm.
with Max Blumenthal is one of my favorites.
Hmm.
Dialogue Works with Michael Hudson. And also these interviews that Garland Nixon is doing with Jody Brar. If you want to keep up with repression in Britain, this is the place to go, actually. And she is a superb critic of imperialism. And Michael Hudson is a superb critic of the current economic situation. So those are 3 places you can go to.
For me, it is Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. Professor Wolf, Economic Update. I adore him. I absolutely adore him. I met him once and I'm like, yeah, I'm such a fangirl. I love listening to him because he actually gives you the facts with hope as
Mhm.
well, which is necessary. And Letters from an American. I'm blanking on her name right now. I listen to her every day. She is a historian. I read her on Substack and I listen to her podcast. And I feel bad that I'm blanking on her name right now because she is really excellent. But Letters from an American is one of my favorite sources.
Okay.
She goes into the history as well as current events and ties them
Good.
together.
I also want to bring up that I think perhaps at the moment, the most open form of media is Substack. That is, it has the most interesting things. I subscribe to things like
Yes.
Think Bricks. I
Hmm.
subscribe to Vijay Prashad's tremendous work on the global South. And these
Hmm.
things are really illuminating. They are the
Yes.
opposite of what you read and listen to in corporate media.
Yes, folks are definitely putting in the work, and it's nice to have that as a resource. And just to give credit where credit is due, Letters from an American is Heather Cox Richardson.
Okay.
Someone turned me on to her, and I happily share her with anyone in your audience who's not aware of her.
Excellent. Okay, I wanted to do my own narrative watch because there's a story that particularly irked me. I want to pick out the story, very common one in Western media, from the New York Times, titled "How a Chinese Dissident Fled to South Korea in a Rubber Boat." It's a stirring tale of escape from a cruel dictatorship to a friendly democracy after many failed attempts to flee. Our hero, Dong Guangping, spent 36 hours in an inflatable rubber boat before finally being grabbed by South Korean authorities and allowed to speak to a lawyer who he knew would help him achieve his dream because, quote, he was now in a democratic country run by a rule of law. Never mind that country just recently outlasted a U.S.-favored coup in an attempt to return it to its long history of dictatorship and crushing of workers' rights. The story was well recounted in all the major Western media, which de-emphasized the fact that Dong was picked up 3 times and returned to China, kicked out of Thailand and Vietnam, and returned by fishermen as he attempted to swim to Taiwan. They didn't seem to be that interested in his valiant struggle. What freedom is he fleeing to, and what rule of law is he now under? Is it the British freedom of the Magna Carta, where the government is now not only jailing dissident members of Palestine Action, but also rigging trials to convict them as terrorists, as well as unlawfully detaining and torturing pro-Palestinian activists such as ex-legislator George Galloway and the labor and human rights lawyer Dan Kovalik, as well as refusing entry to the country of commentators critical of the actions of the Israeli state, Cenk Unger and Hassan Piker? Is it the rule of law of the Trump presidency, which has now murdered without trial over 200 South American fishermen, claiming without proof they're drug runners? Or the rule of law of Trump himself, who has openly proclaimed in seizing oil tankers in the Middle East that, yes, we are pirates, as well as the Europeans who have seized $300 billion in Russian assets and every day come closer to spending their illegal loot? Or is it the freedom offered by the Zionist backer of the Israeli IDF, Larry Ellison and son David, who have fired dissenters on CBS News, censored TikTok, and are in the process of dismantling what's left of any objective reporting on CNN? China, the supposed autocratic country out of touch with its workers, has in its 5-year plans, which are set after a period of much consultation with workers and regional authorities, hoisted more than 800 million people out of dire poverty, one of the greatest transformations in modern history, and which now has a longer lifespan than the cradle of democracy, the U.S. There, in the U.S., 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, with any severe medical bill leading to bankruptcy. These thrilling stories of freedom, which the press latches onto, are a pack of lies designed to show Westerners how great they have it, even as their living conditions deteriorate, not only day to day, but now with the coming global recession, hour by hour. They are imperial fantasy with about as much truth as 2 centuries ago Rudyard Kipling's colonial tantrums like The White Man's Burden, The Jungle Book, and his celebration of the slaughter of British troops defending imperial plunder, The Charge of the Light Brigade. The Times' breathless story of escape is essentially a little boy's adventure tale, one that ought to be retired and that does no justice to the complexity of the emerging multipolar world.
Ta-da!
I'm sick of those stories.
Yeah, yeah. Well done, Dennis. Again, propaganda.
Yep. Yes.
And all you have to do is scratch the surface just a little bit, ask a few more questions, but we're not trained to do that. It's very instant gratification and, oh, that feels good, and off we go.
Yep. There we go. Freedom. He fled to freedom.
Yay.
And so this is particularly, I think, appropriate because this is the 4th of July. So we are talking about what it means to flee to freedom. Okay, the final segment, ours, is called Moldy Bread and Virtual Circuses, Imperial Entertainment in Decline. Today, the focus is on 2 television series which offer, though in somewhat disguised form, a critique of contemporary global inequality and the skewed morals which in mainstream media accompany that imbalance. The 2 series, Widow's Bay and Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed, are both produced by Apple TV. Both illustrate what is possible to say in a highly controlled medium, and in their limitations, what is no longer possible to say, or what is in the process on corporate media being closed down at every moment. Apple, by the way, is the only major media company not to sink its profits into AI. It got off, in terms of TV, to a slow start with its hits, Severance, the morning program hardly being that, and with some contemporary clinkers like Margot Has Money Problems. Severance, a favorite of bourgeois critics, posed as a workplace critique while actually apple-washing the company's practices, such as exploitative outsourcing. While the morning show, though mildly excoriating daytime news shows for their blatant sexism, ultimately found the good in their constant blathering and translating the news into flashy, unentertaining entertainment. In these two recent outings, though, the company seems to have found a cagey way of lodging a critique. Widow's Bay is a comic horror series set on a mythic island in the Northeast that the mayor, who's played by the American's Matthew Rhys, the focal point of the show, wants to turn into the next Martha's Vineyard. The problem is the island is haunted not only by its religious, misogynist, colonial past, but also by its serial killers in its less remote past. The residents, led by a salty ex-sea captain and a quirky mayoral aide, unpopular in high school and mocked because she survived a serial massacre, continually warn the mayor not to go ahead with this mass tourism project. He remains largely oblivious to their warnings until slowly, episode by episode, he begins to acknowledge that not every island can be turned into a tourist paradise. It's the same lesson Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner are now being taught by a mass movement of Albanian street protesters in their attempt to create a billionaire's haven, which just happens to be also a strategic waterway connecting the Adriatic and the Mediterranean. The problem of mass tourism is to this day also overwhelming Madrid, where Madrileños are now desperately attempting to keep from being another Barcelona. Yes, an international city, but one which every day loses more and more of its authentic flavor. Or Bali, where new luxury hotels and condos every day eviscerate a unique and lively Hindu culture. Reese's Mayor Tom, who attempts affability and frequently fails at it as he becomes more obsessed with transforming his island, is that frequently, at least in series other than American ones, and particularly in Scandi noir, villainous figure, the real estate developer, here in slight disguise as the mayor who supposedly just wants the best for his town. These are always figures of disgust in European series attempting to corrupt the locals with their dreams of privileged expansion, akin to the evil figure in past Hollywood westerns of the railroad magnate, who is about to pillage the town supposedly in the name of progress, but actually in the name of personal profit. It's slightly ingenious to put a former villainous figure at the center of the series and have audiences rooting as much for as against it. On the one hand, it's a sneaky way of validating progress for profit, in this case, the tourism industry dragging the town into the 21st century. But on the other, it's a warning that the sanctity of place, even in this case, one with its rotten secrets, is not to be tampered with. The consequences are disastrous. As in the two-part finale, the tourists expecting a luxurious experience are instead trapped underground as the island rages against them in a storm outside, and as we watch Cape Cod being turned into Amityville. I'll stop there for a minute and see if you had any comment, and then I'm going to go to the next one.
I am put in mind of how my TV watching and my movie watching and all of these things have changed when I put in a parameter for myself. If I don't want to watch crime, if I don't want to watch the one hero who can have a partner, who's saving the day, you put in that, and now there are fewer and fewer things to watch. You realize how much, particularly American television and some Brit, of course, is all crime centered. And so that's how I think when you have crime statistics that are lowering, Americans actually thinking crime is higher because it's all
Absolutely
we're
correct.
watching.
Yes.
It's television, it's books, it's movies, it's magazines, it's all of it all the time.
Yes. So there's not more crime, there's more crime series.
There you go. Bing, bing, bing.
Yes, which people are reading as more crime. Yes, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
Yeah. By the way, because I go looking for series all the time, and I'm always looking for something that's new, right? I find the majority of series, because now they're trying to get cheaper budgets, are anime and reality series. There's less even series in person. It's harder to find them. So
Yes.
there's that, Okay, I want to go to the next one. Just as penetrating in its own way is Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed, where superb Tatiana Maslany from Orphan Black is punished unceasingly for daring to want to have sex without guilt with a camboy. What begins as physical pleasure without guilt quickly morphs into Paula being attacked, having to learn how to defend herself, and then being arrested for defending herself. There's an element here of the old American puritanical guilt that any sex outside of marriage or hardcore commitment leads to disaster, but that is not the overriding point of the series. Paula is trapped in a conventional lifestyle. She loves her daughter, who her former husband and his conniving partner are trying to wrest from her. She resists and flees the suburban corporate mom image, which will not hold for her refusing to go along as the window dressing to her husband's boss's party, where she is chastised for mispronouncing the name of one of the other Stepford wives as Kirsten rather than Kirsten, while all the time wanting a more playful sex life that her husband is unable to offer. This is the hysterical woman of Freud's Vienna of the early 20th century, here persecuted for stepping outside the rigid boundaries of a life which has seemingly changed little in over a century. Her bucking that rigidity leads to potential devastating consequences, not just with her daughter, but with the law. The other prominent point of the series is that Paula expects the people she encounters to be decent, but instead she meets everywhere the ruthless but respectable denizens of a profit-driven society. These include the male cop who determines her guilt, mainly by her acting outside the norm, her ex's partner who fixes the judge for their custody battle, her coworker who seemingly helps her only to betray her by using her plight to get ahead as a journalist, complimented by her editor for being a Machiavellian backstabber and learning the lesson that a real journalist has no friends. All this is initiated by the original transgression, the betrayal by the cam boy, because later she is told he saw her love for her daughter as exploitable weakness. This series is far superior to Apple's other series on the subject of monetary sexual liaisons, Margot Has Money Problems, where the usually reliable showrunner David E. Kelley succumbs to a cautious, pedantic examination of the subject. Maximum Pleasure is also extraordinarily well written, with episode 6 paying off in a shocking and novel way Chekhov's dictum that a gun that appears in Act 1 must go off in Act 3, and boy does it. And I'll ask you if you have any comments on that.
I very quickly, I will say you are going to make me resubscribe or re-up my Apple TV subscription. They are doing really good stuff, but it's like, how many services can I have? I find it incredibly interesting how threatening a woman's bodily autonomy, sexual freedom, and ability to make her own choices and navigate the world the way she wants to is so incredibly threatening.
Yes, that is the core of this series, actually, and it's very well aware of what those threats are, as well as being aware of a wider world in which she's surrounded by these other people who just want to use her at every moment they can.
Oh yeah,
because she's a victim.
It's interesting when you realize that nice doesn't mean good, and we are in a very transactional society and culture,
Right.
and maybe we always have been. It's just our turn as grown-ups to notice how the system works
Maybe that's it.
and how well you participate or don't participate in
Yes.
it.
Yeah, and how you get disciplined if you don't participate in the right.
Yes. How dare you not do the dance the way we taught you how to do it? It's Bridgerton, in a modern day. Bridgerton is a Netflix series where, despite all the beautiful trappings, everyone is trapped in doing culture and society in a very particular prescribed way. And when you don't do that, you are a threat and you are punished.
That's very true. And thank you, Leanne, for being our special guest today. And we'll be back next time with more lies.